Welcome to Feel Good Fridays with NECAT Network. We are here promoting great work of nonprofits in our community, especially during the COVID-19. My name is Shauna Lynn Brandmeier. I'm the Vice Chair for the NECAT Board. With me today is Angie Adams from the Pencil Foundation. We are so glad to have Pencil Foundation and Angie with us on this Feel Good Friday. Welcome, Angie.
Hey, Shauna Lynn. Thanks for having me.
So we wanted to really highlight the great work that Pencil Foundation has historically done, but again, as I mentioned, especially during COVID-19. Can you kind of talk through us some of the main programs of Pencil Foundation, and then we'll kind of move into what you've been doing for COVID-19 efforts as well?
Sure. I will say that our largest program really is connecting mentors and tutors with students, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's with classrooms of students. And so thankfully, we have been able to continue doing that work through virtual platforms, whether it's having business partners record videos to talk about their career paths, or even to read a book aloud to an elementary school student. We've had a lot of partners create that video content and are now in the process of launching some platforms to make it easier to schedule with students. So we're happy to continue that work.
And if volunteers, do you take volunteers on that, or how is that based? Is it more teacher-based?
No, we really rely on our network of business partners. We have about 700 businesses that we partner with to recruit their employees to participate. So an example I'll give is the architectural firm ESA. They have several team members who have historically gone into schools and done tutoring and mentoring in person. And so they actually recently created a career video talking about the education needed to have a career as an architect or an interior designer. And then we moved that out through a platform that the school district has so that all high school freshmen had access to that video and about 200 others as they think about career exploration.
And so if businesses or people want it, you're always taking volunteers for that. So if there's businesses out there in the community that wanted, they could definitely contact Pencil Foundation and find out more ways to partner with the mentoring and tutoring portion.
Yes, I will say our website, which is pencil4schools.org, allows easy access to figure out if you want to volunteer, ways you can plug in, whether you want to volunteer in terms of tutoring or mentoring. Or we do operate a teacher resource center called the LP Pencil Box. And we are in constant need of volunteers to help with that resource center in terms of sorting product, packaging product. And one of the twists with COVID has been actually creating student kits and delivering student kits to school sites so that students and their families can drive by the school sites and pick up supplies they might need as they're learning from home. So we probably have slots for 20 to 40 volunteers per week in our teacher resource center.
And so how many schools are part of the Pencil Foundation? Are all of the Metro schools part of Pencil Foundation?
Yes, so we serve strictly Metro Nashville Public Schools, but that's roughly 160 schools. And we also serve charter schools. To us, whether it's a charter or a traditional school, they're still all Metro Nashville Public Schools. So teachers, students, everyone at those schools has access to the resources that we can offer. And I will say that virtually every one of them participates with us in some way in terms of accessing product or tutors that they otherwise couldn't access without our assistance in terms of recruiting business partners.
And I think that's a good point for people in the community to know that you service all of Nashville Metro schools and some charter schools, because I think they may think, well, maybe it's just certain schools. So it's great to know that all of our schools in Davidson County have a partnership of some kind with Pencil Foundation. So for the Pencil Box, for teachers, for students, speak a little bit more about how you shifted during COVID-19 and how that has impacted. You mentioned a few ways it's impacted your efforts, but if you could speak to that, I think that would be helpful for people in the community to know what's going on during this unprecedented time.
Sure. I know there's been a lot of mention in the media about how not only do our public schools educate our kids, but they also feed a huge number of our kids. And so Pencil operates 4 school-based family resource centers, and I think they've seen the greatest shift in their work during COVID. They have become distribution points for Second Harvest Food Bank. to make sure that the students and families who typically get meals from that school have access to food boxes. So we have distributed hundreds and thousands of boxes of food on a weekly basis from 2 of our 4 sites throughout COVID, to really make sure that those families have the food they need. And then also, we don't think about this, but a lot of our students, probably 4,000 or so, are considered homeless or housing insecure. And so making sure that in this difficult time that we're in touch with those students and make sure we have good contact information for those students to hear what their needs are and to plug their needs as much as we can to keep them engaged in their academics.
And so how is Pencil Foundation, through their Family Resource Center, how are you getting those meals and supplies to students? Are they still coming by the school and picking them up, or how does that program work?
Yes, it is funny to me to think about how much the whole Pencil team has embraced the concept of curbside pickup. So it is like the biggest drive-through food distribution you've ever seen, to go to Antioch High School, for instance, and watch how cars wrap around the building and the parking lot to do a drive-through to pick up food boxes. Or even at our Teacher Resource Center, teachers can order supplies online and do a curbside pickup. So I think that being outside in the open environment, even with staff and volunteers wearing masks, it still creates a very safe feeling of not being, in a space and still getting people the resources they need.
2020 is definitely a curbside pickup year. That's
Yes.
the new phrase for 2020. And I think that's a good point of keeping people safe and making them feel comfortable in that environment, but still giving them the resources they need. I think all of us can appreciate any work around that, especially in the nonprofit world, of how do you still reach people and give them what they need in a safe way. So,
right. And, one of the challenges we've had, and it's, sort of been a blessing and a curse, is we've had historically about a 6,000 square foot warehouse facility for our teacher supply store, which felt large and generous until you try to socially distance all of the volunteers working at the same time.
mm-hmm.
So the company, the Rogers Group, who donates our space to us, gave us an additional portion of the building. So now we have 13,000 square feet. So we're in the process of renovating the other side of our building so we can have even more volunteers, be distanced and safe, and continue to do the work of building student and teacher kits.
And that's a great way to adjust in 2020. And it's amazing that they offered additional space for that, because I really think people want to be safe in this time. So I think that's wonderful. And I think it's great that you're able to still provide services to these families. So Family Resource Center is definitely a key component to your efforts, it sounds like.
It is. And,
so
I have to say, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
And I have to say that whether it's our need for volunteers to help the Family Resource Centers with food distributions, or whether it's recruiting for volunteers to help at the LP Pencil Box, even when people are worried about their health and safety, they still want to support the community and those people who are in
mm-hmm.
need. So we have not had a shortage of volunteers, which has been a wonderful thing to witness, that we've actually had more family groups come in. I think because we're spending so much time with our families and thinking about ways that they can do volunteerism together. So we'll have, a parent and a couple of kids come in and work in the Teacher Resource Center together. Whereas in the past, maybe we would have had, employees of a company come together, but now we're having family units come, but we still haven't seen any decline in the level of volunteerism and desire that's out there to help.
That's great that you haven't seen a drop in volunteers, and especially families, because it shows how to still be active in your community, even as a family unit. And I think that's important also in this tough time of showing children resiliency and how to still give back. And that's a key component to education as well. So tell me some of the new things that are going on in Pencil Foundation. I think you've got some great announcements and that kind of thing that we wanted to highlight.
Yes, I did touch on the expansion of our facility, and we're able to expand the facility thanks to the Rogers Group donating it to us, but also a Tennessee Cares grant. And then Bank of America has selected Pencil as the recipient of a Neighborhood Builders Award, which has funding to finish the renovation of our building. So we'll hopefully finish that renovation December or early January, which is great. So that allows us to have about 13,000 square feet for our work in terms of the Teacher Resource Center. And then when I think about long-term, making sure that we are a resource for our district and our students, Pencil is 38 years old, but we don't have an endowment. So we recently have announced an endowment campaign to make sure that we can exist forever for Metro Nashville Public Schools and act as a resource recruiter for the district. So we have a $3 million endowment goal, which would assure that there are always at least 2 full-time staff members working for Pencil and recruiting resources. So as I mentioned earlier, we typically right now have about 700 or more businesses and organizations who work with us at any given time to support our 160 or so schools. And the district keeps asking us for more and more in terms of what they need and what they want for our students. And the beautiful thing is the community is always willing to help. So I think our role is really just taking the need and taking the desire and matching them and making sure that the right people get placed in the right school to make the best impact. So we're excited about the endowment campaign and assuring our long-term stability for the district and our students.
Our schools will always need people to support them, and teachers and children with schools and supplies and meals, as you mentioned. So an endowment, congratulations on setting up that campaign and long-term thinking and goal setting on that. How long do you think that campaign will go on? What are your goals for that and the duration?
Well, we've estimated about 3 or 3.5 years, but I would love someone to surprise me and make that campaign end sooner. I will say that we launched the campaign in honor of one of our great founders, Sue Spickard, who was a classroom teacher. And I always love to share sort of the incentive behind why she created Pencil. She taught first in a very poor, economically deprived area in the Northeast. And then she followed up with teaching in a very affluent area in the Northeast. And what she quickly realized as a young teacher is that both groups of students had the same capabilities. They didn't come to her with the same sets of resources, but they had the same capabilities. And so her mindset was, if we can get them the right resources they need for where they are, their capabilities are unlimited. And so I think that's still what's behind the mindset of Pencil recruiting resources, is that all students have amazing capabilities. They just need different resources to actualize those capabilities. So it's fun to think about someone surprising me and loving that mission as much as Sue Spickard has, and taking care of our endowment campaign in short order.
How long was Sue a teacher?
She was a teacher for a few years before she started having her own family, and her husband was a young doctor. And so I do love the story that she was the breadwinner for a few years while he was in medical school before the tables were turned, and he became the breadwinner and she became the one raising their family.
That's a great story. I love to hear the backstory of how nonprofits are founded, and it's always by somebody that had the passion and the drive to make their community better. So I think I love knowing the background of the Pencil Foundation. So thanks for sharing that with us. Any other topics or highlights about Pencil Foundation that you would like Nashville, but also Middle Tennessee viewers to know about the organization?
I guess on the heels of sharing about Sue as our founder, I will also give a shout out to several companies in town who were at that founding table as well. And beautifully enough, 38 years later, are still actively engaged in tutoring and mentoring students. So Ingram Industries, HCA, Greater Nashville Realtors, Kroger, those were some of our founding partners who have never waned in their support. Their support has changed over the years. And I guess that's one important thing to mention about Pencil is we don't create programs. We are largely not educators. We are resource managers and we are relationship people. So we rely on Metro Nashville Public Schools. I work closely with Dr. Battle and her team to figure out what needs are there and how can the community make a significant impact on our teachers and our students in the education process. And then we go take that message out to the community and ask for support, largely in terms of volunteerism, not dollars, which is also usually surprising to people, to make the impact that the district wants in terms of our students. So the ways partners engage, change, and evolve over the years. If I think early on, then most of our partnership work was done with elementary schools, and it was about cute little kids who needed mentors, needed help with basic homework. But now the bulk of our mentoring and tutoring is with high school students, really helping them explore career potentials, helping them see the link between what they're studying and a career. An example I always love is I was miserable at geometry in high school, didn't understand why anyone ever needed to learn geometry. But if you take a student who's in a communications pathway at a high school, and you have a lighting designer from CMT who's been a great partner, you have that lighting designer from Country Music Television go into a geometry class and explain how he uses angles to hang lighting plots to light a country music video, suddenly those kids are all about geometry. And so it's those type of experiences that we can give to kids. And then it's always energizing for the business partner that somebody now appreciates their work in a different way than they did before.
And I think that's a really good point, because children in school, they're all about the schoolwork and their heads down and trying to figure it out. But if we as adults can connect how that's important and what it means throughout their life, whether it's a passion for a hobby that they love or a career path, or have you thought about this, making those connections. And I think that's an important point of the Pencil Foundation and the work you do, of really connecting resources with those schools. And I think that's an important point, that you're the connectors in the community, so to speak. How many volunteers on average does Pencil Foundation have, say, in a year or so?
Gosh, I would say 30,000-ish. You know, it's interesting. Most of our relationships are with the 700 companies we work with. And we typically don't track a lot of individual volunteers' names, but we track the hours they invest. And so we know that the number of volunteers is huge. And, you know, one thing I always want to point out, both in terms of the LP pencil box, but then just in terms of exposure for our students, is we don't always realize that in Davidson County, about 75% of our students live in very challenging economic conditions, meaning that their worlds aren't necessarily as big and broad, and they don't have exposure to as many things as most of us adults do and have on a daily basis. And so bringing resources to them to open their eyes to what opportunities lie ahead of them is just as important as making sure that they have pencils and paper. And I think what I'm hearing from our Family Resource Center coordinators now who are still engaging with students is that right now students often just need a sort of a pat on the back and say, hang in there. Like, none of us love this virtual world. I don't love virtual work, and I know you don't love virtual school, but hang in there. This is not forever. So I love that we often will play together. Right. We're all Zooming together and none of us are loving it.
Exactly. And I think that's important for children too. I mean, we've all had our worlds turned upside down. And I think as adults, if we can lead children through that, I find children are more agile and than adults sometimes, but we all need a little bit of encouragement, especially in the Zoom world. And especially learning via Zoom when they're used to a classroom. I think that's an important point. Any other items you wanted to?
Well, I always look for silver linings, and I will say that one silver lining that we recognize and that the district has said is that, you know, for years our school district was trying to make sure that every student had a personal electronic device to be able to access educational content, but that seemed like an unattainable dream. Just like our $3 million endowment, some days seems unattainable, but it's not. And so now suddenly overnight, we're a district where every student has a personal device to access content and education, and they're learning the technology skills to do that independently in so many cases at very young ages. So while they may be missing out on sort of the traditional education that you and I think about, they're also getting a very different education in terms of resiliency and technology skills that will be valuable for a very long time.
I think that's a key component too. The innovation and the growth in times of struggle and that resiliency that we are teaching the next generation, and the technology. You're right. This world is not going to get rid of technology anytime soon. It's here to stay. And so if children can learn that and operate in that world, and learn resiliency at the same time, I think those are all key components to a great education. So that silver lining of COVID and 2020 is a good thing to remind people of. So any other highlights of Pencil Foundation for Feel Good Friday?
I think it always makes me feel good to know that the community values what we do. But I always like to bring it back to a student and to have a student voice come through in our work. So one thing I'll share is it's probably been a year ago. We visited with a group of students at Glencliff High School who talked about what it's meant to them to get to know pencil partners who have come into Glencliff to work with those students. And one young woman who is a new immigrant, new American, she shared that she had been fascinated by the medical profession since she was a child, but had no idea that that was an option for her, just no concept of how you became a doctor or work in the medical field. And through a pencil partnership with Meharry, she was able to get a mentor who could outline the path to her for her to become a doctor, provide her with an internship at Meharry, and really now just make this young woman come alive with the thought that she can become a doctor. So I always just love to share a personal story because I think that's what motivates us to get up and do our work or to volunteer, is knowing that we've made a difference. And so I will say thank you to everyone who supports Pencil in a host of different ways. And we have ways that anyone can plug in and make a difference. But knowing that this young woman is on a pathway to a medical career, that's motivating for me every day.
And I think that is a wonderful Feel Good Friday, just to know that there was a program to show her how to become a doctor. She had a dream. Pencil Foundation helped connect her with someone who could help spell it out and show her the way. And I think that's a key component for also adults of we need to show children their dreams and help them along that path and how to make it reality. And I think that is definitely a great way to end Feel Good Friday. Thank you to Angie and Pencil Foundation and all your work and all your volunteers and the programs that you do. And I will say congratulations on the endowment campaign as well. So thank you for joining Feel Good Fridays with NECAT.